Valentino Rossi. He is the most beloved rider in MotoGP history. 9 world championships, a personality larger than life, and an army of fans draped in yellow. But his story isn't only about victories and charm. Rossi also carried a darker, controversial edge that split the paddock and forever branded him as both genius and villain. The most infamous flashpoint came in Sepang, 2015. The world championship was on the line. Rossi accused Marc Marquez of playing games, helping Jorge Lorenzo instead of racing clean. On race day, the tension boiled over. Rossi and Marquez clashed wheel to wheel, trading passes that looked more like a street fight than Grand Prix racing. Then, on lap 7, Rossi snapped. He deliberately ran Marquez wide in a slow corner, glanced over his shoulder, and as Marquez tried to lean in, Rossi's knee extended. The Honda went down. Millions watched in disbelief as Marquez tumbled into the gravel. Race direction called it unsporting conduct. Rossi was docked 3 penalty points and forced to start the title-deciding Valencia race from the back of the grid. His bitter rival Lorenzo went on to win the championship. Rossi's fans claimed Marquez deserved it. Critics said Rossi had crossed an unforgivable line. Sepang 2015 is still replayed as the day the doctor revealed his sharpest scalpel, willing to wound if it meant protecting his legacy. But Rossi's controversies didn't begin there. A decade earlier, in Jerez 2005, he and Sete Gibernau fought for victory in the final corner. Rossi barged through with brutal contact, knocking Gibernau wide and stealing the win. On the podium, Gibernau refused Rossi's handshake, accusing him of betrayal. For years after, Gibernau never won another race, and Rossi's shadow haunted him. Fans called it the handshake curse. Rossi thrived on psychological warfare. He painted rivals as villains, taunted them with celebrations, and knew how to play the crowd against them. Max Biaggi felt it. Casey Stoner felt it. Marc Marquez felt it most of all. Rossi was loved, yes, but he was also the sport's most cunning manipulator. The controversies weren't accidents. They were weapons, sharpened as carefully as his racecraft. Valentino Rossi wasn't just the doctor. He was the surgeon who cut deepest when it mattered most. Sete Gibernau. His name is forever tied to controversy, not because of crashes, but because of betrayal and politics. He entered MotoGP as a respected Spaniard, even a friend to Valentino Rossi, but their relationship soured in one of the sport's most infamous moments, Jerez 2005. In the final corner of the Spanish GP, Rossi and Gibernau were neck and neck. Rossi lunged in, braked late, and slammed into Gibernau, pushing him wide. Rossi took the win, Gibernau furious. On the podium, Rossi extended a hand. Gibernau refused. That moment, the handshake snub, sparked years of animosity. Fans called it the handshake curse, because Gibernau never won another race after that. Many believed Rossi broke him mentally that day. Others argued Gibernau was right. Rossi's move had been dirty, a champion abusing his power. The stewards never punished Rossi, fueling accusations that he was untouchable. Gibernau became the face of MotoGP's politics versus talent debate. He was fast, consistent, and capable of beating Rossi, but always seemed crushed by Rossi's aggression and the favoritism surrounding him. His career dwindled under the shadow of that Jerez moment, and he retired a man remembered less for his victories and more for his bitterness. Sete Gibernau's controversy wasn't born of reckless crashes or bans. It was psychological. He went from Rossi's ally to his most bitter enemy, his name forever etched into one of MotoGP's most controversial chapters. Casey Stoner, he was one of the fastest riders the sport ever saw, but he was also one of the most polarizing. On track, he was devastating, a man who could ride the untamable Ducati Desmosedici like no one else. Off track, though, his bluntness and constant clashes with MotoGP's politics painted him as the paddock rebel. Stoner's controversies often came from his honesty, which many saw as arrogance. In 2007 and 2008, when rivals complained that his Ducati had an unfair tire advantage from Bridgestone, Stoner fired back, accusing Rossi and Yamaha of politics. He hated excuses, but ironically, he was accused of making them whenever he failed. His public spats with Valentino Rossi fanned the flames. The two traded barbs for years, with Rossi mocking his complaining, and Stoner accusing Rossi of being untouchable in the eyes of officials. The tension peaked at Laguna Seca 2008, in a race that became an instant classic. Rossi dived past Stoner at the corkscrew with both wheels off the tarmac, an overtake that many called genius, but Stoner branded reckless. After Rossi won, Stoner delivered a cold handshake and the now iconic quote, "Your ambition outweighed your talent today." To Rossi fans, Stoner was a sore loser. To Stoner fans, he was the only man brave enough to call Rossi out. doubt. But perhaps Stoner's biggest controversy came not in a single crash or clash, but in his early retirement. At just 26, after 2 world titles, he walked away. He blamed politics, favoritism, and a lack of respect for riders' safety and health. Some critics grumbled that he left too soon, walking away at his peak, while others saw it as proof of his refusal to play MotoGP's political games. Supporters argued he exposed MotoGP's toxic environment. Casey Stoner left as one of the most gifted champions ever, but also one of its most controversial. He wasn't there to play politics, to smile for cameras, or to worship idols. He was there to ride, and when he'd had enough, he left without apology. Max Biaggi. Before Valentino Rossi became MotoGP's global superstar, Italy already had its emperor, Max Biaggi. Stylish, arrogant, supremely talented, Biaggi was adored by his fans, but despised by many rivals, and no one defined controversy in the late 90s and early 2000s more than him. The flashpoint was the Biaggi versus Rossi rivalry, which escalated beyond sport. At Suzuka 2001, things boiled over. In the pits, Rossi claimed Biaggi punched him in the arm before the race. On track, the feud exploded at Catalunya that same year. While battling side by side down the front straight, Rossi stuck his elbow out as Biaggi tried to push him toward the grass. Cameras caught it. 2 riders, both refusing to yield, practically fighting at 200 kilometers per hour. Rossi took the win. Biaggi's reputation as MotoGP's bad boy was sealed. But Biaggi's controversies weren't just about Rossi. His aggressive riding style made him a paddock villain. Riders accused him of deliberate block passes, intentional contacts, and cold, arrogant behavior. Officials fined him repeatedly for dangerous moves. Yamaha once even banned him from testing after he reportedly lashed out at a mechanic. For fans, Biaggi was a divisive figure. In Italy, he had an army of supporters who saw him as stylish, misunderstood, and unfairly demonized. For Rossi's legion, Biaggi was the enemy, the man who tried to bully their hero and lost. Biaggi's talent was undeniable. 4 250cc titles and multiple MotoGP wins. But his controversies overshadowed much of his legacy. He wasn't remembered as the cleanest champion. He was remembered as the man who made fans choose sides. The emperor who turned into the sport's most unapologetic villain. Marc Marquez, he arrived in MotoGP in 2013 like a thunderclap. Within months, he was breaking records, dragging his Honda sideways through corners at impossible lean angles, saving crashes that physics said should have been fatal. He was celebrated as the modern alien, a phenomenon beyond explanation. But with his brilliance came a reputation that divided the paddock. Ruthless, reckless, maybe even dirty. The controversy exploded in Sepang 2015, the very same race that immortalized Rossi's Nita Marquez clash. Rossi accused Marquez of deliberately slowing him down, playing cat and mouse to sabotage his title bid and favor fellow Spaniard Lorenzo. Replays showed Marquez lunging, blocking, slowing, and even looking back mid-corner. To Rossi's fans, it was proof. Marquez wasn't racing to win, he was racing to ruin. Marquez denied it, insisting he was just fighting. But the damage was done. He was branded a villain in Italy, booed by Rossi's legions. From that day, their rivalry became toxic. But Sepang wasn't the only flashpoint. In Argentina 2018, Marquez's reputation for aggressive borderline moves hit boiling point. He stalled on the grid, rode the wrong way to restart, and then carved through the field with kamikaze passes. The worst came against Rossi. Marquez dived into him, knocking him onto the grass. Rossi nearly hit a marshal as he crashed. The paddock exploded. Rossi called Marquez dangerous for the sport. Race officials handed Marquez a ride-through penalty, but his image had already been burned. Reckless, arrogant, untouchable. And yet, Marquez's riding was also mesmerizing. He won 6 titles in 7 years, redefining what was possible on 2 wheels. But every miracle save, every impossible lean angle, came with risk. He pushed not just himself, but those around him, to, and sometimes beyond, the limit. Ask his rivals, and they'll tell you, Marquez didn't just want to beat you. He wanted to break you, physically, psychologically, and reputationally. For some, he's the greatest of his era. For others, he's the dirtiest. In MotoGP, there may never have been a rider so fast, so fearless, and so controversial all at once. Dani Pedrosa on paper, Dani Pedrosa never looked controversial. Quiet, small, almost shy. He was the opposite of Rossi's showmanship or Marquez's wild aggression. But beneath the calm exterior, Pedrosa's career was riddled with controversies that made him one of the most polarizing figures in MotoGP. The flashpoint came in Estoril 2006. Nicky Hayden, Pedrosa's teammate, was was leading the championship, Honda's golden hope. But Pedrosa, desperate to prove himself, pushed too hard in the race and collided with Hayden, taking both riders out. Hayden's title chances almost evaporated in that single moment. Pedrosa was branded selfish, reckless, and unwilling to play as a team rider. He apologized, but the damage was done. Fans and critics saw him as the quiet man who stabbed his teammate in the back when it mattered most. Later in his career, another controversy brewed quietly inside Honda. Pedrosa discovered that Honda was feeding Marc Marquez better parts and more data, effectively making him the #2 rider despite years of loyalty. Furious, Pedrosa stopped sharing his data with Marquez's crew, a rare act of rebellion for a man known for his silence. When Honda shocked the paddock by signing Jorge Lorenzo for 2019, Pedrosa abruptly announced his departure, leaving many to believe he was pushed aside for politics, not performance. Pedrosa's controversies weren't the loudest, but they cut deep. He wasn't a shouter or a showman. His grudges were silent, but they changed careers, fractured teams, and split fans on whether he was a loyal soldier or a bitter loner. Johann Zarco. He came into MotoGP as a double Moto2 champion, touted as France's next great hope, but in the premier class, he quickly built a reputation that made rivals nervous and fans divided. A rider on the edge of brilliance, or on the edge of recklessness. His biggest controversy exploded at the Austrian Grand Prix 2020. Charging down the straight at over 290 kilometers per hour, Zarco swerved across Franco Morbidelli's line. The collision sent both men flying. Morbidelli's Yamaha and Zarco's Ducati turned into unguided missiles, slicing back across the apex where Valentino Rossi and Maverick Viñales were mid-corner. The bikes missed them by inches. Rossi later said it was the closest he'd ever come to dying on a racetrack. Zarco was blamed immediately. Critics accused him of being reckless, of endangering not just one rival, but the entire field. His aggressive block passes in other races added fuel. Many riders, including Pol Espargaro, publicly labeled him dangerous. Zarco defended himself, insisting he was just riding hard, but the label stuck, even beyond Austria. Zarco's career has been littered with drama, mid-season team splits, accusations of betrayal, and constant whispers that his ambition sometimes outweighs his judgment. He remains one of the grid's most unpredictable characters, either capable of brilliance or of a move so wild it terrifies everyone watching. Jorge Lorenzo. If Rossi's controversies were fiery and Marquez's were explosive, Jorge Lorenzo's were ice-cold, calculated, tense, and deeply political. Lorenzo entered MotoGP in 2008 as Rossi's Yamaha teammate, and from the very start, controversy surrounded him. At Barcelona that year, Yamaha management ordered a literal wall built between Rossi's and Lorenzo's garages to stop them from sharing data. It symbolized the Cold War between the two. The rookie Lorenzo was brash, confident, and refused to play second fiddle to the king of MotoGP. Rossi's fans booed him, painted him arrogant, while Lorenzo's supporters hailed him as fearless. But the peak of Lorenzo's controversy came in the 2015 season, when Yamaha teammates Rossi and Lorenzo battled for the title. When Rossi clashed with Marquez at Sepang, conspiracy theories erupted that Marquez was helping Lorenzo. Whether true or not, Lorenzo's silence and his appeal to the FM asking for harsher punishment for Rossi enraged Rossi's global fan base. To them, Lorenzo wasn't just a rival, he was a traitor who used politics to steal a title. He won the championship, but he lost much of the crowd forever. Lorenzo's personality never helped soften the edges. He was clinical, methodical, and lacked Rossi's charisma. His aggressive celebrations, like his infamous helmet salute or diving into swimming pools in full gear, only added to his reputation as smug. Rival riders often said he was brilliant, but impossible to like. The controversies didn't end with Yamaha. In 2016, he signed for Ducati, blindsiding his old team mid-season. When he joined Ducati in 2017, whispers spread that he carried Yamaha's secrets with him, though nothing was ever proven. For some, it was another betrayal. Lorenzo's story is one of contradictions, one of the smoothest, fastest riders of all time, but also one of the most coldly controversial. He didn't need to crash rivals off track to earn hatred. His politics, his silence, and his attitude were enough to divide MotoGP down the middle. Jack Miller. He never tried to hide behind PR polish. From his Moto3 days, he was nicknamed Jackass for his wild, no-filter personality and crash-prone style. Fans loved him for it, but it made him one of the most controversial riders of his era. In Moto3, Miller was infamous for on-track clashes, even getting into a physical fight with Alex Marquez after a collision. That raw aggression followed him into MotoGP. He often found himself tangled in accidents, sometimes his fault, sometimes not, but always with headlines attached. Miller's controversies weren't limited to crashes. His off-track persona was just as divisive. He drank beer on podiums, swore freely in interviews, and brushed off criticism with a grin. To some, he was a breath of fresh air in a sport drowning in corporate polish. To others, he was immature, reckless, and unprofessional. Perhaps his most controversial moments came in teammate tangles. Riders like Cal Crutchlow and Danilo Petrucci have spoken about how Miller's aggression inside the garage was as fierce as outside it. Even Ducati management admitted he could be difficult to handle. Yet Miller's controversies also built his popularity. He was never boring, never political, and always himself, raw, flawed, but undeniably entertaining. His crashes may have frustrated teams, but his wild, unapologetic personality made him one of the most polarizing riders on the grid. Andrea Iannone, he didn't earn the nickname the Maniac by accident. His career was littered with wild moves, collisions, and chaos. At his peak, he was fast, fearless, and loved for his unpredictability. But in the end, his controversies overshadowed his speed, and he left MotoGP disgraced. On track, Iannone was notorious for reckless aggression. In 2016, while riding for Ducati, he infamously collided with his own teammate, Andrea Dovizioso, in Argentina. Both factory bikes were destroyed, Ducati team bosses fuming. He laughed it off, but fans branded him selfish and careless. It wasn't the first time, nor the last. Iannone seemed to treat every corner like a battlefield, even if it meant taking out allies. But his downfall wasn't just about crashes. In 2019, Iannone tested positive for anabolic steroids. He claimed contaminated meat was to blame, but the Court of Arbitration for Sport wasn't convinced. He was handed a 4-year ban, one of the harshest punishments in MotoGP history. For a rider once considered Italy's next hope, it was a brutal fall from grace. The doping ban ended his career in its prime, but the controversy didn't stop there. Iannone's flashy lifestyle, relationships with celebrities, and constant media appearances made him more of a tabloid star than a racer. Some loved his wild persona. Most saw him as proof that talent wasted by ego never survives in MotoGP. Andrea Iannone will be remembered as the Maniac, a rider who made headlines as often for his chaos and scandals as for his victories.